Now let's take a look at what William did immediately after the Battle of Hastings. So first of all, he waits in Hastings for the Anglo-Saxon magnates, the earls and higher tiers of the hierarchy, to come and crown him king, and then they don't, to William's surprise. So then he embarks on a campaign around the south, not going directly to London. He sends some of his forces to Winchester to seize the treasury, and then the rest of the forces head east and make their way around the south coast and then across the south, pillaging, murdering, destroying everything in their wake, to such an extent that towns actually, as this campaign continues, start actually running towards William, desperately trying to surrender. And he continues this campaign until he gets close to London, and he goes around London to the west and arrives at Berkhamsted, at which point the Earls of London, or rather of England, leave London and submit to William. So, 1066, the submission of the Earls. As just mentioned, William waited to see if Anglo-Saxon nobles would come to surrender, but none of them did. Anglo-Saxon troops met up in London, and the Witan made Edgar Atheling the king. This decision was supported by Edwin and Morcar, and London acted as if it was preparing for war. So William needed the south coast under his control, and Winchester, the royal treasury. William marched to London, as I've just mentioned, destroying homes and villages on his way. However, he couldn't get into London as it was a fortified burh, so he went to Berkhamsted, where he was met by important Anglo-Saxons, including Edgar Atheling, who swore oaths to obey him, who submitted. So this event's known as the submission of the Earls. This is when the Anglo-Saxons give up their resistance and accept William as king. So why did they submit? I mean, London was a fortified city. William would have lost lots of men if he had attacked directly. Now, just be aware this bit here, by the way, is crying out for a 16 marker. Arguments for and against. So, London was a fortified city. William would have lost lots of men if he'd attacked it directly. And the earls and leading noblemen, now that Harold Godwinson, the military Anglo-Saxon contender for the throne, is dead, the earls and leading noblemen had rallied around Edgar. This is our last hope to have an Anglo-Saxon king, and he does have a more legitimate claim to the throne. The claim was supported by Edwin and Morcar. William has control of the south. However, Mercia and Northumbria, the north, were the next two strongest earldoms, representing over half the country, and they're the north. William's only got control in the south. They could have continued to resist. In addition to this, William and his troops are deep into enemy territory. If you could get the upper hand in a battle and force a retreat, where are they going to go? They have nowhere to retreat to. William's claim to the throne was irrelevant if the Witan had already chosen a new king backed by the church. Now, that's an important thing there, is that means the church in England, remembering the Pope has given William the papal banner with which to march into battle with. William's troops have been reinforced from Normandy. However, the numbers in his army were still small compared to a fyrd levied from the Earls. Many Normans had also recently been ill. It's possible if the Anglo-Saxons had countered when the Normans were ill, they could have won. However, they didn't. Now, whilst they may have been able to levy large numbers from the fyrd, they would have been inexperienced peasant soldiers, just like at Hastings and Stamford Bridge before that. So why did they submit? Well, although William was a stronghold, William's route had threatened to cut off from reinforcements from the north. So if you remember earlier, I said William went around the south of London and arrived in the east at Berkhamsted. Sorry, in the west at Berkhamsted. What that meant was any support arriving from the north, William could cut across and stop reinforcements arriving from London. It effectively managed to cut it off. So, although London was a stronghold, William's route threatened to cut it off from reinforcements from the north. In addition to that, Edgar had only recently arrived in England. Without ready-made support, he took no decisive action as king. Effectively, he doesn't have, whilst the Earls have made him king, he's not got the sort of force of personality and decisiveness to make any decisions. is too reliant on a variety of different opinions. Some believe that the Battle of Hastings had been a crushing defeat, the best warriors had been killed, and many Anglo-Saxons simply accepted this defeat by, this is God choosing us to lose. This is God's will, so let it happen. Okay, this is their punishment, they believed, for the sins of the English. That's why you've got that icon there of somebody being punished. They believe God has decided William should win. The other reason they submit, as mentioned earlier, William had acted quickly to seize Winchester. This gave him control of the royal treasury, as in that's where the money was kept. Without the treasury, Edgar cannot reward his followers or people who fight for him, and William could. In addition to that, William is an extremely effective leader. His followers continue to obey his orders despite any of the dangers which befall them. The other thing is, as mentioned earlier, destroying everything in William's path was a brutally effective strategy. At first, people resist him, but as his campaign has continued across the south, people in towns and villages rush towards him to submit because they know if they don't, they face destruction. Is this the Earls submitting to try to save London from the same fate? So they do. They submit, and William becomes the king, and he's crowned on Christmas Day, December 25th, 1066, straight away aligning himself with the church as a form of propaganda. William swears to be a gracious king in return for loyalty from the Anglo-Saxons and the new Norman settlers which will inevitably come to England. William wants a trouble-free takeover and wanted to keep some Anglo-Saxons in power. This is his policy of integration. For example, he even kept many Anglo-Saxons in influential positions in government. So to start with, William adopts a policy of integration. He's going to combine his new Norman magnates and people in positions of power with the existing Anglo-Saxons and integrate the two societies. We'll see how that works out for him, but that's his initial policy, integration. Combined with that, though, he does need to reward his own followers. He's got to pay the mercenaries, the paid soldiers who fought to help him become king. And William also declares that all land belongs to him, so he can grant it out or give it out to who he wanted to as rewards. That's going to annoy people because that obviously means taking the land away from some people. What you'll see later on is he's going to divide that land up into smaller chunks so he can reward more people and also dilute the power of the tenants-in-chief. So William also raised the geld tax and sent lavish gifts to the Pope as a way, and others, as a way of rewarding and thanking them. So it keeps the church sweet because you want the church on your side, don't you? And so raises the geld tax to rates unlike anything seen before so he can get more money, and then sends lavish gifts to people who can help him. Rewarding his followers inevitably meant some Anglo-Saxons lost out, and you'll see that cause rebellions later on. You'll see it with Edwin and Morcar, and then further down the line, other earls as well, the tenants-in-chief as well. So how does William reward some of his followers and establish control? First, one method we've got of this is controlling the borderlands, the Marcher earldoms. This is the area. The Marcher earldoms are along the border with Wales. They consist of Chester, Shrewsbury, and Hereford. So Chester is given to Hugh de Vrange. Shrewsbury is given to Roger de Montgomery or Roger of Montgomery, and Hereford is given to William Fitzosborne, who had been William's right-hand man during the invasion and now conquest. The Marcher earldoms were on the march of Wales, where invasion was likely. The people in charge of them were loyal to William. This is him rewarding his followers. These earldoms, therefore, are given lots more independence and special privileges. They were given more privileges with lawmaking to deal with problems quicker and better. Effectively, you're allowed to tax people heavier and then use that money to build protection on that land, build castles so that Wales don't invade. They're given permission to build towns without having to seek a special charter and things like that. A lot of the tax they collected didn't have to go to William. They just spent it on building castles and defending that border. More on the policy of integration. William didn't want animosity when he takes over. He wants to minimize the bitterness. He wants a trouble-free takeover. We'll see how that works out, but you'll see issues caused by Bishop Odo are going to make that difficult. And the simple, straight fact that Anglo-Saxons don't want a Norman in charge. And he also charges high taxes. So, but regardless of that, William's policy of integration was his attempt to take over England without a significant change to who controls what. Some earldoms, especially up north, were left under the control of previous Anglo-Saxon earls. For example, Edwin and Morcar were allowed to keep their lands, whereas other earls used money as a bribe to keep their positions or gain more power, such as Gospatrick. This tactic seemed to work until later in William's reign. Inevitably, though, some Anglo-Saxons lost out, and as mentioned earlier, this causes resentment. William's policy of integration, here's a key phrase for you, William's policy of integration was misconstrued by many Anglo-Saxons and gave the impressions that the conquest could be reversed. In fact, they're thinking, well, hang on a minute, if he's not dominating us with Normans, we can try and push this back. It's wrong, proves to be a huge misjudgment from the Anglo-Saxons, but that's what they think. They think, well, if we resist enough, he'll back off. That's not what happens. You'll see later on in the course, he actually doubles down and he'll shift from integration to Normanization, but for now he's integrating. That changes in around 1070. Another way William wants to establishes his control is castle building. He built castles in areas where rebellion was common or in rebellious areas. What you're seeing on my icon there is the idea of a strategic location. Castles help tackle rebellion because it's a place where he can garrison soldiers, but also they caused resentment, which created rebellion. The flip side of that, however, is that once they realized the effectiveness, once the Anglo-Saxons realized the effectiveness of castles, they're less likely to rebel, so it also deters rebellion. The Motte and Bailey castles. Military buildings, they have a square keep upon a hill, a motte, and an area of land below, that's the bailey. They have everything necessary to keep a troop ready to fight: barracks, stables, armoury, blacksmith. It was surrounded by a ditch, usually filled with spikes, to protect it. The other thing here is remembering William will spend a lot of time in London or in Normandy, so the Motte and Bailey castles are a way for him to position his soldiers all across the country in an attempt to make it so they can respond quickly to any rebellions that happen. So the purpose of these, to control and intimidate. Not only were they a military base, but they also acted as protection and disrupted the skyline. They dominate the skyline, intimidate the Saxons. They're also cheap and quick to build, so they can be knocked up quickly and try to establish Norman control in an area